Hello everyone, my name is Erik. I'm very sorry I couldn't be here today, but we decided to solve this by using this movie of my presentation. I've offered the organization to host a conference call or do something else to make sure that any remaining questions are answered. In the back of the presentation I'll also give my details, so you'll be able to contact me with any questions you have. Well, the presentation about companion diagnostics, EU developments specifically. What we'll do first is look at the current framework for companion diagnostics, and then make a segue to the new developments. So here we go. Companion diagnostics currently, the way it works in the EU is that companion diagnostics, obviously they consist of a medicinal product and an IVD, in vitro diagnostic component. There's no specific procedure for companion diagnostics at this moment, which means that they have to be authorized through the normal route. The IVD is authorized via the IVD route, and the medicinal product is authorized via the normal medicinal products route. So what does that look like? If you're a companion diagnostic product, I'm reasoning now from the assumption that you're the manufacturer of an in vitro diagnostic device rather than the accompanying medicinal product. So you found out that you fall within the scope of the in vitro diagnostic directive. Well, then, like with other medical devices, because in Europe in vitro diagnostic medical devices, as the full term is, are a subset of medical devices. So for an IVD, you have to demonstrate that it meets the essential requirements that are in the in vitro diagnostic directive, and you also have to demonstrate that you've implemented a quality system that meets the requirements. So nothing spectacular there. It works again much like under the medical devices directive. So as manufacturer, you have to control everything that happens within your quality system, and you have to sign off on that with a declaration of conformity. The declaration of conformity is the act that allows you to put the CE mark on the in vitro diagnostic. In some cases, the notified body, or a notified body I should rather say, because there are many, must sign off on the design of the in vitro diagnostic device and on the quality system, and we'll talk about that later, how that works in practice. So there's no CE mark required for devices for performance evaluation, which is basically the in vitro diagnostic, you could say in vitro diagnostics equivalent of research medical devices or medical devices for clinical studies, and also not for in-house developed tests, or as we also call them, home brews. So what risk classes do you have for in vitro diagnostics? Because the risk class determines the requirements for conformity evaluation. So there's the general IVDs. Those are, and this is all still applies to companion diagnostics that are an in vitro diagnostic device. So you've got your general in vitro diagnostics, other than those with an indication listed in Annex 2 of the directive, which lists the indications that require intervention of a notified body. Self-testing devices, they also require intervention of a notified body. Of course, there's also the category of IVDs for self-testing. So think blood glucose meters, for example. There's IVDs for NX2 list B indications. So that includes tests for toxoplasmosis, amongst other things, but also it also includes devices for self-testing of blood sugar levels. So the self-testing example I just gave was a bit misleading because they are called under NX2 list B and not general self-testing. IVD medical devices, they are in Annex 2 List A. That includes, for example, that's the really risky ones like HIV, hepatitis, and so on. So the risk class determines the level of scrutiny in conformity assessment. Yeah, so that's basically what I've hinted at already. So if your device is in Annex 2, or if it's intended for self-testing, there's a notified body assessment, and if it is and in the cases of non-Annex 2 IVDs or IVDs that are not a performance evaluation device or a self-test device, you can self-certify and give yourself a CE mark. It used to be the case that after you had applied the CE mark, you had to register the IVD that you were going to place on the market in every single member state. That's fortunately no longer the case. When the decision to that effect entered into force on 1 May 2011, that wasn't necessary anymore. So let's talk a bit about conformity assessment. So what conformity assessment routes do we have? I've taken a nice example here from the so-called Blue Book, Blue Guide, which is a really helpful document if you want to understand CE marking in general under EU law. There's very convenient flowcharts in the back, such as this one for the application of the in vitro diagnostics directive. So I'll take you through this through the chart here. So where do you start? Well, you start right here. You determine if your device is a device covered by Annex 2. Because if yes, then you're in the high risk class and you will very likely end up over here with certification by a notified body, which is witnessed by the little X's here, which denote the notified body's number. So you check, okay, is my device on list A? So, like for example, HIV. Then I have the choice of this conformity assessment route or this one. So you have different options. One is type examination combined with quality system assurance, or you do full quality assurance with design examination, which is the most comprehensive way to do it. Is your device in list B, then go basically through the same route. If your device is not covered by Annex 2, then it may be intended for self-testing. If it is, then you will still end up at the notified body one way or the other. So for your, not your blood glucose meters, but other self-testing devices. And if it's not intended for self-testing, then basically you're in, well, all the other in vitro diagnostic devices, and then in that case you are out of the scope of the notified body's scrutiny. That is currently the case for about 80% of the in vitro diagnostics on the market. I should warn you that under the new in vitro diagnostic regulation that is currently being proposed in the EU, that would be turned upside down. So that means that 80% of non-notified body scrutiny will become 20% of non-notified body scrutiny. So that would mean basically that most of 80% of the in vitro diagnostics would then have to be looked at by a notified body. So that's a really big sea change that you should prepare yourself for. Just a quick remark on the current EU framework for homebrew companion diagnostics. There is no EU framework for that, which is considered a major flaw in legislation that is currently being remedied. Why? Because the practice of the member states on what they allow for homebrew companion diagnostics varies so wildly. Usually what you see for companion diagnostic devices with homebrew devices in national situations is that they will impose rules on in terms of a laboratory quality system, for example. They will also try to regulate it via clinical practice, things like that, but there's no specific EU harmonized rules for it. And if you have a homebrew companion diagnostic, it's not placed on the market as the CE terminology goes. So therefore you don't have to have a CE mark, which is this is going to be regulated in more detail in the new regulation, which we'll look at later. So what will the new EU framework look like? The latest step in this, well, you could almost say a Shakespearean drama, because there's quite a lot of emotion involved in the debate. For those of you who have followed the discussion, have seen very emotional statements being made by both the Parliament calling industry liars about the regulatory burden that they would face, and on the other hand, industry saying that what Parliament proposes will lead to loss of innovation because manufacturers will take their business elsewhere. If you're interested in that whole discussion, you can follow that on my blog, my weblog, of which the URL is in the back. So a big caveat, because this whole debate is still going on. The analysis I'm going to give you here is per the latest step in the regulatory procedure, the Parliament's plenary vote that happened on 22 October 2013. So details may still change, even though the Parliament has voted. That is only a proposal. The fat lady, you could say, hasn't sung quite yet, because the European Council, which is the member states altogether, also has to give its blessing to the text and may still propose amendments. So what is one of the interesting things in the new rules? You can here on the left you see the text that was initially proposed by the European Commission for definition of companion diagnostic. So that was the first time in European legislative history that this term was going to be defined. And on the right, you see the amendment as proposed by the European Parliament. So you see that some elements have been moved around. The bold letters, the bold elements here are the elements that the Parliament proposes to change, and they are changed by the bold letters here. So what you see is that the definition of the Commission seems to be broader than the definition of the Parliament, because the definition of the Commission only triggers on to select, whereas the definition proposed by the Parliament says essential to the selection. So the device must be essential for the selection and not just be intended to select. No, intended to be essential to select, apparently, which is a narrower scope. And again, the Commission uses eligible for targeted therapy. Targeted therapy could actually mean therapy that used as a neutral term. Neutral in what way? Well, because the Parliament reduces targeted therapy to therapy with a medicinal product or a range of medicinal products. So what the Parliament wants is that that you can only be a companion diagnostic if you are essential to the selection of patients as suitable or unsuitable, not just eligible but suitable or unsuitable, which is also, I think, quite some shades of gray in the other direction, for specific therapy with a medicinal product. So that's actually quite a lot of move in scope, I would say. We'll have to see what the Council does with this, but I wanted to just show you this to make it clear that even the definition as we speak is still being debated. Another point I think I need to make is that even the underlying definition of medical device, because here you see the element of a device being nested in the definition of in vitro diagnostic. Device in another part of this regulation is defined as medical device, as in vitro diagnostic medical devices and accessories, and the term in vitro diagnostic medical device nests the term medical device, which is also defined in this regulation. And even the term medical device is still being debated at this moment, which is strange because the EU subscribed to the Global Harmonization Task Force definition of medical device, and now they're actually proposing to include a definition of medical device that says that a medical device is any product that has the direct or indirect medical purpose of, and then you've got the list of diagnostic and therapeutic purposes, but direct and indirect purpose of. So that means that the definition of medical device could actually be a lot wider. So it's really difficult to see how this will play out, because on the one hand, the definition of medical device will become way wider in a way that I think the EU will not be able to get away with if they take their global harmonization task force and currently IMDRF harmonization seriously. So this definition may still change, but watch that space. And I just want to make the point that you should be aware that the definition of medical device can become a lot wider. Then something more about how it works with the new in vitro diagnostic medical devices regulation that adopts the Global Harmonization Task Force risk-based model for classification of in vitro diagnostics. That's good, because that shows that in that case, at least, the EU does take their international harmonization seriously. And that model places companion diagnostics in class C. That's the class of high patient risk and low public risk. So that means that you're going to, for a companion diagnostic, you'll have to go through the conformity assessment procedure for Class C medical devices. In Class C, that's also a category of devices that is always subject to notified body approval. So what does this notified body approval look like? The conformity assessment, in other words, the notified body will look at the design requirements, and the design requirements and also labeling requirements, of course. For companion diagnostics, they must, the documentation and the intended purpose specifically must mention that it is a companion diagnostic, what the relevant target population is, and it must also contain directions for use with the associated therapeutic products. What does the notified body check? The notified body checks clinical performance. So the notified body checks clinical performance and clinical utility. And the manufacturer should supply, sorry for the typo there, clinical evidence relating to the impact of a positive or negative test on patient care and health outcomes. The quality, the conformity assessment, what does that look like? It looks, it's obligatory Annex 8 quality assurance test. So that means that the strictest version of conformity assessment that I've shown you in the flowchart, that was this one and that one. Those are the strictest ones. So those have to be, that has to be followed, because there's now a single procedure for these diagnostics. So the notified body consults. They have to consult with several entities: the EMA or the competent authority for the interface with the medicinal product, and they have to consult with a reference laboratory. That's a new entity under the new in vitro diagnostics regulation, to do a verification of compliance with common technical specifications, which we knew already from the existing directive, or with an equivalent level of safety and performance if there are no common technical specifications. With respect to notified bodies, you may have heard that there is talk about special notified bodies being set up under the medical devices regulation, and also under the IVD regulation, by the way, that have to consult with the European Medicines Agency for the high-risk products. Well, that procedure has only been foreseen for Class D devices, so those are the high risk for patients and high risk for public class of devices. Well, clinical then, there's a regime now for clinical performance studies. So that's basically clinical trials with in vitro diagnostics to support intended use, which has been included. So you're not stuck with national law anymore, unharmonized national law. And also another important one is that while there is a compulsory counseling regime that's being included for genetic tests in the in vitro diagnostics regulation, that regime, as it's currently drafted, does not apply to genetic testing by companion diagnostics, strangely enough. But well, that's a hole that they might actually plug along the way. So post-market requirements, you have to do trend reporting, surveillance assessments. Important there that surveillance assessments will not only be announced but also be unannounced, and that's already enforced, by the way, the unannounced ones, and they'll be conducted not only at your own facilities but also at critical suppliers and subcontractors anywhere in the supply chain. I was at the seminar of one of the notified bodies quite recently, where they discussed how they would implement their unannounced audits. And you'll have to account for those starting around the beginning of the new calendar year, because by then the notified bodies will have figured out how they will do it, and will have set up their plans. Another requirement is that companion diagnostics will be prescription-only medical devices, important as well, so also plan for that. Homebrew companion diagnostics, they are possible. There's a new regime, as I hinted at, for homebrew in vitro diagnostics. So you don't need CE marking, but they are considered put into service, which means that they're subject to the regulation and also subject to general safety and performance requirements. So what will that mean? That means, first of all, that you can only be a homebrew device if you cover a specific need that cannot be met by available CE mark devices, which is an interesting one, and the competent authorities and the Commission can intervene ex post on an ex post basis to check whether you've done that assessment correctly. Your manufacture and use are subject to the institution's quality management system, and the institution also has to be accredited under ISO 15189 or equivalent, which is a standard for good laboratory practices, basically. And also member states may require you to notify, so they may or may not do that. They may or may not impose further safety requirements, so you will be in a situation where you still have national divergence in the EU, important to keep in mind. There has to be a summary of safety and performance for the intended user. You have to register them in UDEMET, the new electronic database of the EU. There's also an obligation to report serious incidents and field safety corrective actions. So then also by explicit request, where are we now with this whole process? Well, we are, as I said in the beginning, we are at the point where the European Parliament has just voted. If you're interested in the whole vote end result, you can see if you can download this document. If you use this number here, then you can easily get it. Or just Google Parliament and plenary sitting 22 October 2013. You will get all of it. And the next step in the procedure is the Council's first reading. That means that the Council will look at the proposals and see if they agree. I took a nice picture from the European Parliament's website. They have a very nice flash animation that takes you through the whole procedure. So what we've just had is the first reading in Parliament, and now we are at the first reading in the Council. Now, what does that look like in the whole provisional timeline of things? So the Commission's proposal, that's basically here, that was looked at by the ENVI committee of the European Parliament. ENVI committee made that proposal to the Parliament. Parliament has voted on that now. The Council will also look at it. They will both have a first reading. But, and that's why I put these little explosions in place, the EU elections in May 2014 may get in the way. And why? Because the first reading by the Council does not have a deadline. So if the Council doesn't really like it, they can actually draw out this legislative procedure until the elections. And then the proposal is not adopted and is removed from the agenda. Well, then after the first reading, we can get a second reading, maybe even a third reading in this procedure. That rarely happens. Then there's a transitional period that, depending on who will be right in the end, will be either 3 years if you ask the Parliament and 5 years if you ask the Commission. So that means that this is more or less the timeline that you're looking at. I said that the Council has to like it too, and that the Council doesn't have a deadline for its first reading. That's actually the only reading that they don't have a deadline for, so this is where things happen or not. When the parliamentary plenary took place on the IVD, this man over here, Peter Liese, the guy responsible for the rapporteur, it's called, for the in vitro diagnostic regulation, was really angry and gesticulating at well, these two very ostensibly empty seats, where normally the council sits if they think the subject is interesting or needs intervention by them. By staying away, they show that they really have no plans to move this along very quickly. The first time that the Council will look at this officially is 10 December in the last Health Council in the Lithuanian presidency, and then it's over to the Greek presidency as of the 1st of January 2014 to see if they can sign, seal and deliver this. Well, as you probably know, Greece has also a lot of other things on their mind, for example, a completely collapsed economy. So we'll see how quickly this goes, whether they're able to do this. The Parliament is really bent on getting this done. Also the Commission, because for them it's really it's the last thing they can do before they will be replaced, because the Commission is also replaced, by the way, in May 2014. So to conclude. Well, you can see that European in vitro diagnostics law is still very much in flux with this revision, and the text is not final yet. So, well, it's, I think this basically says it all. It's a very much moving target, so you have to watch developments closely. Well, this is me, smiling to you from my home in Amsterdam as I record this movie. If you have any questions, if you want to know anything, these are my details. And this is the address of my blog, where you can read a lot about this whole process going on. So thanks very much for your attention. Well, this is the DIA disclaimer, which I'm supposed to show you. This is my own disclaimer, which just says that this whole process is still very much in flux, insofar as you didn't get it from this sign. So please don't rely on it as the final word, because the legislative procedure is not quite finished yet. So thanks very much for your attention, and again, apologies I couldn't be here in person. I was there in person yesterday and also part of today, but unfortunately I have to be on a plane by the time that this movie plays. So, well, hopefully we'll be in contact, and otherwise enjoy the rest of the conference.